I'm delighted we're able to change perspective. We've ascended now, we've returned to the depths. And this is really where we're going to talk about the story of the tarot and the archetypes. But also, because we had this story upstairs, one of the things to think about, again, using the structure as the story itself, that when we ascend into the living library, into the sense of this is our story, we come back down into the story of our principles and our laws, our structures. Why are we structured this way? Why is it so difficult to be human? And one of the things that, as I was saying upstairs, that this is becoming quite apparent to me is that we are transforming from the Piscean into the Aquarian realization. And that it's very important that we begin to realize why the Mayan calendar, why it ended the way it did. It was trying to say that our pyramids, you see, are revealing to you that you are a sacred mountain, that you've grown out of these foundations of being human across the ages to finally stand at the top now as the outcome of all of this. And so the question when it turns from the Piscean, which is reaction, how am I against what you think? How am I not in agreement with that? And through that gulf, we essentially create a conversation of I define myself by being against something you are for, meaning through contrast or contrariety. And this is to a certain degree what hammers out the black and white keys of our consciousness, the piano, as it were, the instrument. That's going to say, but when you finally come full circle, and this is what the Maya were trying to say, when you realize that you journeyed through all of these changes, all of these possibilities, so that you would finally come to understand that as the outcome of all of this, the Aquarian realization will now be co-creative, meaning bring something to the table. What I get now is that we've become convinced that we have no voice in things. And that's the very opposite of where we need to be. And that's the key here to the intimate space. It's saying, at least where you live, at least when you're private, when you're around those you love, when you're trying to cultivate a story you want to share with your family, tell the story of being human that you need to tell and make it intimate. Because this intimacy will get the attention of the universe. Your loud proclamations of what you're against really is uninteresting at this point. It's saying, don't tell me what you're against, tell me what you're for. The Aquarian is that which says we're all given the same raw materials. The question is, how do we play those raw materials? How do we move from belief to artistry? Meaning, how do we finally give ourselves permission? And that's again the intimate key as well, is that no one can give our hearts permission except the story we tell ourselves. And if we begin to tell our hearts a different story that's more nourishing, our hearts will know. Because our hearts are not simply our hearts. We have a human heart, which means we have within us a story of the whole of humankind. And that's why we have to be kind to that human. And we have to begin with ourselves. We have to begin where we live, as I say. So that's why I thought we could all read this together, because I wrote this down, and this really did come from what I felt the voice of the deep feminine, the splendor underneath this story of what now is actually being asked for us to remember, and that part of our magic here is our willingness to give voice to this story. So if you would join me and really feel, and this was part of our understanding of our ancient texts, why so many of them are written so we speak them out loud, was that wonderful feeling, those wonderful qualities of wisdom, when they are spoken even to the flowers go, thank you. I like that, because it's never the words, it's the energy. So give me that energy. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to give me that energy, because that's what we're giving the ancestors. They're saying, you're not going to see us. We're your roots. So trust us. And do it with a little sense of wonder, and you'll be amazed at who you become. We blossom. It's not others. We blossom. And that inspires the whole species to finally go, I like that story better. So let's begin with, O human form divine, remember yourself in time. You are a work of art, a gift of creation. Your human story is of inestimable genius, beauty, and meaning. You are a planetary species destined to be great artists of consciousness. Welcome home, my ancient friends, my beloveds. It is time to remember. Remember, we have come full circle. We are here to blossom. And I like that story better. That's all it takes. And this is why I wanted to enter into, because this is the full moon. And it's very interesting, our full moon tonight, because it's known as the beaver moon. And this is really from the indigenous, the American Indians that would look at the beavers building their dams late winter in the moonlight. And so it really became a way of not telling time, but telling life. And this is something that the moon wants us to do, which is to move beyond simply rational thought into this sense of the recognition of cycles, of rhythms, and times. And the mystery of mysteries, this is the moon and the High Priestess that is from my tarot revision by Leigh J McCloskey. We're going to enter into the tarot, and I talked a little bit about the squaring of the circle. And the simplest way of thinking of this is that we have the circle, we have this fullness, we have this life that's given to us. And the squaring of the circle was the sense that if we create unique notes, if we create unique contrasts, we can begin to create unique possibility. You can almost look at this like you would see a book in the library. You'd say, well, it has a unique spine, a unique story, a unique journey. So that squaring of the circle is, to a great degree, the creating of a unique facet of this story of being human. And the reason why this was part of our alchemical tradition, our ancient tradition, was it's saying that we've been creating facets, this magnum opus, this great work, not in one time, but across all time. So we can finally hold this diamond that was once beautiful in its ancientness. But through our effort, we turn this now and realize, oh, how extraordinary. And that's why I say when you're in a library, translate all those books into facets of a lens. And you really get a sense of, oh, I get it. The conversation is extraordinary. It's a radiance that is saying with every refraction, with every life, we add more to this living jewel. And that's why these traditions are ancient technologies of the imagination. And the tarot is known as the royal road. And when we think of the royal road, this was not to look down on other people. It said, no, there is a nobility in each of us as human. And too much is given that demands no nobility at all. Entitlement will do. But when you decide that you want to know these things, it is because you have begun to understand you must become worthy of these things. That's the key to the Grail. None of those knights were entitled to anything. They created a quest to become, through the act of becoming worthy, truly capable of embracing that which was not something they could possess, but actually something that illumined their very souls. And that's a very different quest indeed. And that's why we're gathering, because in one way or another, we have been doing this together for a very long time. And that's why the Royal Road is saying, you of noble spirit, you who are able to show up and say yes, rather than yikes, let's put our heads together and realize it's up to ourselves to tell a more noble story of who and what we think we are. And let's begin with ourselves. And let's stop waiting for others. And that's where we understand, and this is very important because the tarot it was known as the Book of Tea. It was the mystery of mysteries itself, and actually was considered the greatest book because it did not rely on words at all. That the ancients took, as I say, like the piano, this sense that the human psyche is structured with these tuning forks. And that's the easiest way to look at it, that each of the unique archetypes is a unique tuning fork. And that the picture language was, to a great degree, to tell us that, listen, the language part of your mind, the expression through words, is very different than that which affects you through image, because image goes to a far more ancient part of your storyteller. Now, we've overlaid this with a lot of intellectual difficulty, so we don't trust the picture language. We critique the picture language. And a lot of what the Moon and the High Priestess are trying to say is enough with the critique. You're not going to figure me out. I want you to understand that you have the tools to explore me, but these are not tools to critique me with. They are tools to enter me with. And that has to do with true relationship. And this is where the ancient mysteries known as the Arcana Arcanorum, or the secret of secrets, will take us into the theater of the psyche, the major arcana, and the living wheel. And this story of the living wheel is where we start to understand alchemy and the expression from alchemy of solve et coagula. This was a oft-repeated phrase, which was dissolve and recombine. Because we are told that alchemy is a pseudoscience. What is not told is actually it was actually a schism in science. Because alchemy and all of our ancient sciences begin with the first principle of life. Therefore, all alchemical operations are in tandem with the stars, they're in tandem with nature, because you are not transforming something from what it is not. You are taking through the process of solve et coagula, dissolve and recombine. But think of that as breath. In a sense, breathing, gestating. You're allowing something to be born that is fulfilling all of its conditions. That's why you'll see in alchemical imagery these what are called alembics or retorts. They're these vases, glass vases. And it's saying you see each of these vases as a unique world, but what you are doing is bringing not simply gold out of the lead, you're bringing life to its most perfected possibility and realization. And that's, to do this, we must enter into the archetypal patterns of the psyche to understand the archetypes of the wheel, and again, to remember we are the archetypes. This is the problem. So much of our study said it was to analyze it, we put it at a distance. And that's why I like upstairs, is you can't put yourself at a distance from it. It says, no, you're part of this. You're part of the alchemy. And the alchemy was, it says that the first principle is life. You have grown up in a time where your first principle, because of the way you understand science, begins with math. It begins with division, with separation, with the story, you are not it. But the alchemical model is saying, no, you are it. You are the very living form that will transform this knowledge into unique creation, unique expression. And that's why, as we enter the archetype of the world, what I'm going to do is introduce the arcana really like a cast of players with the story of I am. And I want to really just, this is how I do it in my book as well, is that I have the images without telling you what to believe, how to think about it, because I want to engage this deeper physical knowing. When I look at all of you, I realize you have been in all different traditions, ancient traditions, inner traditions. You are adepts, you are wise and ancient beings. The reason you do not remember this is you didn't want to simply continue a tradition. You finally wanted to come full circle through those traditions to say, now I can actually fly with my own wings. And if you think about this, is what we get from the artists, the sense that I tell a unique story of the universe, but if you paint, you tell a unique story of the universe. Mine is not better or worse, they are unique journeys. And this is what will, again, pull us into the knowledge of I am. And so just as I say this, I'm going to give a few seconds to each, about 20 seconds each, to look at them, and then we'll go into the story. But I wanted to have the whole cast of characters and the wheel, and for you really to say, I am this as well. You know, to start reclaiming. It's almost like I see actors stepping off to the side and going, I'm over here and the center's over there, and this is saying, okay, I want you to step into the center of the wheel. It is not I am uniquely this, I am this, you are this. You're not born into time, you're born into creation. So this is our pattern. This is what the ancient technologies tried to say. Your personality will make you think you're not that. But your ancient knowing will look at these patterns, look at these triggers, and say, oh yes, I am that. And that's where we're at now. We don't need to study the problems of personality now. We really need to put why this troubled mask can finally start to reclaim this deeper knowing. So I am the magus. I am the High Priestess. I am the Empress. I am the Emperor. I am the Hierophant. I am the Lovers. I am the Chariot. I am Strength. I am the Hermit. I am the Wheel of Fortune. I am Justice. I am the Hanged Man. I am Death. I am Temperance. I am the Devil. I am the Tower. I am the Star. I am the Moon. I am the Sun. I am judgment. I am the world. I am the fool. We move into the High Priestess. So that's our cast of characters, 22 in all. So when people say be yourself, just ask which one. And this is also why on the inner planes it is so difficult to have a conversation that isn't, at least to a certain degree, confusing, because there are so many different perspectives. And part of this is the story. What I love watching that, 22 of anything is a lot. I found 22 drawings and then 22 chapters of the book, right? But it started to show me this sense that this living theater within us, when we understand that we're composed, because it's very interesting if you go through that and you get to I am the devil, I am death. The body goes, ooh, that ain't too no, I'm not, you are, you know. And part of this is to pull the circle back in, a bit like actors saying, listen, they're just masks, but they're very meaningful masks. And if we start to play with our psyche more, in a way as we do in theater, because one of the keys here is that in theater we don't learn belief, we learn the suspension of disbelief. So we learn to actually get out of the way of needing to believe anything, which is great because then you don't have to get busy defending anything and you can go exploring. And then if you come back from exploration, then what you've discovered will actually increase the story that we are sharing with each other. And that's why the High Priestess and the Moon, and because these archetypes and any of these stories we could go very, very deeply into, but I really, to honor the Moon tonight and to honor this knowledge of the dark feminine, I wanted to bring these two archetypes into focus. This is the High Priestess. Now, in the Tarot, this is the knowledge of the Moon, the mystery of mysteries. This in the Tarot, interestingly enough, the Moon in the Tarot is the Moon in Pisces. And this is very important because essentially the knowledge of the Moon, like the knowledge of the Sun and Moon, the knowledge of the Mother and Father, will tell us a unique story, but the knowledge of the Moon will really get into this story of the collective unconscious, why we have so many oceans of such toxicity flowing through us and trying to make sense of this great story. So I thought I'd begin with the Moon and dark power and dreams and nightmares, because the Moon is when we open the door into our dream state, where all the rules and regulations of logic and the waking world disappear, and suddenly we find ourselves in conditions we can't control with logic. We can't even understand oftentimes, and they force us to encounter ways of perceiving that we could not know when we were standing in the light of day on the land. Suddenly we're thrust into these oceanic situations where we seemingly will be drowned by the waters, but what she's going to show us is that the story is that you are learning to swim. But this is why the Moon in the Tarot is called a probationary path. Both the Moon and the High Priestess is where we will encounter what's called the dark night of the soul, meaning it is where a lot of our learned assumptions about who and what we think we are really torn away from us, and we are no longer given that comfort. So the treacherous journey of both the Moon and the High Priestess is she strips us to our nakedness, meaning she is not looking at form or being convinced by any conversation we're having about how magnificent we are. I see your energy. Because this is the other point about the deep feminine and the dark gnosis, is she says, I feel your energy. What emerges and finally becomes vision is because my feeling reaches a critical mass and it becomes vision. But I do not believe the eyes. This is very important for the knowledge of the masculine and feminine within us. And if we think of Jung, he said they're intrapsychic principles, meaning it's not girl-boy, but it is very interesting about how male and female, how our bodies do hold this knowledge and energy very differently, because she will tell us, she says, I am your ancient knowing. And what I reveal is why the lunar mysteries are essential to the solar mysteries, meaning you cannot know solar wisdom lest you journey through lunar mystery, because in this lunar mystery is the ancientness of your very physical form. I remind you, you are billions of years old, and when you turn your energy away from the skin of things inward, it is dark, and you will not know how to navigate if you think you need to rely on these two eyes alone. And this is where we're entering into, and this is why her teachings are energetic. And this is where in the psyche, when we become obsessed, when we become, she says, I am obsession and madness. What is very interesting, and Jung got at this, he said that only if we pass the abyss separating sanity and madness, can we become truly sane. And that's what the feminine archetypes are about. Don't give me your words, they're comforting to you. Your energy must be true. I will close my eyes and feel you, and I don't care how much you're tap dancing. If I don't feel your truth, I don't buy it as truth, and I will torment you. And this is what we don't understand. Why does the psyche torment us? It's because she says, I know what you are capable of. I know who you truly are, and you want to stay as this little seed saying, oh, I'm just this, I'm just this, I'm just this, let's stay away. She goes, that's not an interesting relationship. And this is what the feminine, because the return of the feminine is true about relationship. It's about etiquette. It's about having manners and understanding what we are and what we are not responsible for. And she says, do you see, I am the sensual truth of energy. And this is also where we find the sexual, the erotic, the keys to consciousness that are not based in logic. They are based in a far more ancient, in a sense, theater of the psyche that says, you cannot keep a controlled version of who and what you are. I will tear that apart. And in one way or another, I'm going to give you something in that armor that will continue to make it not possible for the armor to actually keep. It's going to be temporary at best. And she says, I am the dark mistress of death, and I am the giver of life. None pass beyond time's illusions except through me. And this is what we're going to see in terms of her journey. The figure eight, the watery path, the lunar crescent, this true knowledge of energy. And she's going to take us into the story that you see in this journey of depth and rebirth. You are learning to finally journey, to bring toward the knowledge of the moon, this sensual knowing, this ancient knowing, the knowledge of dreams, the knowledge of nightmares, because you are being trained to trust that this darkness within you, when it merges with the sun, will actually create a radiance that is not based on something you think you are because you've seen it, but something you are because you have become it. You are carrying the knowledge of this ancientness. And that's where we see the male and female, and we're going to understand that this story of our journey is this story of the moon talking about the watery path of evolution and the journey through our root system into the worlds that will bring us back through rebirth into ascension. But this sense of the bottom of the drawing here, we'll see Icarus. And this is very important to our psyches, because Icarus is really that part of each of us that thinks God's out there somewhere. And if I can get closer to the sun, I'll be closer to God, and then I'll have, and these waxen wings melt and we plunge back to the earth. This is really the masculine principle, but it's also our ego. Think about our undoing, and a lot of these have to do with undoing as well. When we are really thinking, I'm getting closer and closer, and then suddenly we crash. And what is that? Why is that? And her story is, she says that, you see, this has to do with births. In ancient knowing, there were three births. There was the birth that was given, the time body. There was the second birth, which is the lunar birth, which is when we turn away from the world of others and we turn inward. And this is really her story in the journey. She says, you will turn inward. And as you turn inward, what are you going to have to deal with? Your dreams, your nightmares, your subjective visions, the things that don't make sense to you at all. And most of the psyche, if we get right down to it, we are bombarded by input. You know, we're navigating, trying to not personalize so much of it, but we are energy receivers and senders. We're radios. And this is one of the things that she's trying to say, I'm going to help you understand that the birth into time, this journey of the waters, this fall of Icarus, was so you could finally return. Do you see this figure 8? We're going to have this story as well. This story that from the fall in Icarus, meaning that we begin, and this is another point about these drawings, you'll see how they all have different stories, but they're all going on simultaneously. This is actually, when we look at pre-Renaissance art, you'll see how the art was multi-temporal, meaning the story was being told as a simultaneous event. So you see like a tapestry, you'll see all of these different scenes going on. Well, what's very interesting is that in the history of art, that are moving into just one thing rather than all these interconnected stories has actually been what has focused us in one way. And part of why I wanted to talk about the picture language and reading an image is that when we look at the image and we start to understand that we can see this not as just separated, but actually territories that are interconnected, and we start to trust as we do, not something we're thinking of intellectually, but where does it take us? And that's why we see this falling into the matter. We can see the beast and death and this story of the dark and foul notions within humankind that aren't in the notions of other people. They are in the very wiring of who and what we are. And part of the story here is that we think of, you know, my joke is that we're livers, and therefore we detoxify the psyche by living it. We don't ask questions from the outside. We take on the difficulty and live it from the inside. And that's part of what she's saying, is saying in the human story of the moon, of the fall, is each of us are Icarus. That's what you understand from theater. You realize each of us are Hamlet. Each of us are these things. That we stop saying it's them and not me. This is saying, no, this is our story. We've come crashing back to earth. And the story we're trying to find now is, how do I overcome my fears? How do I dig deep into this root matter to finally find a sense not of ignorance, but innocence again? Meaning, how can I understand my story without having to have an agenda of being right or wrong? How can I experience something without having to have an argument with you about it? And that's where you see, then we have this knowledge of the anima and animus, or the male and female. So we have the risen Icarus within us. But this is our masculine principle, finally understanding that it is actually in honoring of this dark journey of the moon. And this is why the sacred, the feminine, is saying that when you honor me, you trust that it is a very raucous journey you will be on, but that it is to bring forth a living wisdom. Because here we see the wings of Icarus again, but what is it? It's the embracing of relationship. And that is so true. Her eyes are closed, meaning she's not going to give up her secrets by looking in her eyes. She's going to say, no, I'm going to reveal my secrets through you journeying through your inner oceans and understanding what I seek from you is relationship. Your wings open alone, you fall. If they open in relationship to your deeper energies, realize that which you can see, that which you can't see is like a great dance. It's a breath between two qualities of mind and being. And this is where we see then the High Priestess, Negredo, and the Dark Night of the Soul. You thought it was bad enough. No, but this sense of Negredo is an alchemical expression, meaning the dark or the black, and it's also the prima materia, the raw matter. Why I use this for my codex is you can actually see almost with the modeling there of the paper, this sort of just potentiality, dark potency, not with light, but just a sense of this undulating dark energy. And that's really where she's going to take us into this knowledge of the ancientness of the soul. But she's also going to be the story of the veiled one. This is where we're going to get the story of Lilith and these other relationships to the goddess, because she's going to tell us a story that I remain hidden, and that what I will reveal is I am the mystery of mysteries. I am prima materia, dark matter, mater, mother. I am she who can never be known or unveiled. Now think about this, because this is the moon. The moon only shows one half of her face. The other she keeps in dark. And that's really important to the psyche, because it's saying that, do you see the phases of the moon? It's saying that, listen, and this is why it's related to menstruation, it's related to the blood. It's saying, listen, All that is in motion is continually going through different seasons, different phases, because it's always in process, always following these rhythms, these patterns, these cycles. But the reason that I am veiled is that I am the very source of these patterns, and like the depth of the ocean, which you cannot see, nor can you figure out, you know that I affect. And therefore, and this is something I say in a type of physical relationship, is that oftentimes when you're finding difficulty, start to use the body, start to feel that sense of almost the waters forcing you this way. Because if you think about it, you'd be standing on land going, I'm ready, I'm going to, and then you're chucked into the black ocean in the depth of night. You can't see where you're going, so you don't know where you're supposed to go. All you have are these ancient energies, currents coming up out of nowhere, dragging you down. So what are you doing? Basically flailing around, trying to figure out how not to drown. And to a great degree, these are what we think of as the unconscious elements of the psyche. We're really trying not to drown, but actually, if we look at this from a creative or a positive point of view, it's saying that most of your energies are of this dark knowing, meaning you are not going to see me any more than a tree can see its roots. But I remind you to trust that maybe the things that are not logical, that are not rational, are actually saying they're more about energy. They're about, oh, when that happens, I do this. I'm learning what to personalize and what not to personalize. A bit like an ocean, going on in a boat. You'd say, oh, that's a log in the water. That's not personal. That's something I have to navigate away from. But this is really the knowledge of the sailor, and this is a lot of what this is doing. It's trying to say, she's saying, do you see, I am veiled. I am also the huntress. I connect beauty to the crown, but I show you this lunar diadem. This is very important why we see the lunar crescent in the ancient story. Is that the lunar crescent says in the feminine, I remind you, I am mater, mater, mother. I am the weave of creation. I do not exist in time, I exist as time. Therefore, the lunar crescent is the boat you are building subjectively. It is being built by, in a way, the waves forming you themselves. The difficulty saying, oh, I'm not going to do that again. I'm trying to figure, ooh, I wasn't expecting that. This is trying to say, because in a way, our logical minds, our mathematical minds want to control it. But we are thrown into spontaneous creation, meaning it is like being plunged into the depths. And that's why she says, you see from this womb of intercreative interconnectivity, this arrow, this aim of truth under the direction of will take us on the final journey. And those of you who know the Kabbalah understand this as going from Tifereth, or beauty, to the crown. And this is also, her story is, I am she who connects the abyss, separating you from your own ancient knowing. And this was known as the invisible Sephiroth, meaning that it is that which you are the vehicle. Only your subjectivity, only your creation can actually resolve, because think about love. You can't resolve that as a problem. You can only live that as a possibility. That's why we're art. In a way, we're arguing over what the canvas is made out of, but we're forgetting to paint. And that's what she insists upon. She says, listen, you're going to take this journey, but when you move from beauty to the crown, it's watery. That's why you saw coming out of the moon, this watery path. She says, if it's straight, you think you have to get somewhere. I am this forever. You ride me forever, because in each of you is a unique story of creation finding its way. But to know this, do you see, and here she's veiled above. We don't see her, but we see this journey into the vortex, into the roots, falling down into these stages that we see with the feminine. This is also very important. Why, like in a cat, cats were sacred to Isis, is because their eyes also. They went from very small slivers to open to full. So it's that sense of that I am constantly watching. From that which is in absolute darkness to absolute fullness, I'm constantly different, because the creative spirit, and this is what we don't understand because we so shunned it, is she says, I am a cat. I'm not interested in being herded. I'm not interested in being told what's wrong with me. I am interested in your behaving in a way that makes me interested in you. And that's the etiquette of energy. And that's what the moon and the high priestess are trying to teach us. If you don't show up at the table thinking, well, at least I have some part in this, but you show up simply victimized by these things, then it's saying you're going to stay on the shore and sulk. I want you to realize you're great navigators. And every time you get beaten back, it's so you get back out on my waves because I'm trying to take you deeper and deeper into your own depths. Because guess what? It's a mystery that keeps going. It's not something that ends. And that's the key, he says, is look, we come through these veils, finally, we're born face down into the vortex of time, space, and matter. Finally, the evolving self awakens through the veils to reach out, in a sense, to the milk of the philosophers, this sense of fullness. We cannot see, but we finally hold in our journey this sense that maybe our human story repeats and repeats until finally, as she says, you can hold the truth that I am dark matter, mater, mother. And this was from the Gnostic text, which I love, called Thunder, Perfect Mind, and I really suggest reading it. Especially as women, I suggest reading it or hearing it read through the voice of woman, because it is really the feminine divine speaking. And this is very important because if you can, this I used for the quote in my book, and this is my book and these are my cards, which I highly recommend. But she says, I am the union and the dissolution. I am the abiding and I am the dissolving. I am the one below and they come up to me. I am the judgment and the acquittal. I am sinless and the root of sin derives from me. When you understand that not as contradictory, but as holding contrariety in a type of vital dynamism, then we'll have a sense of who we are as humans. It's not to take sides. It's to hold sides as dynamic contrast, and between those two qualities, to stand erect finally. To not be one or the other, but yes and yes. And that's where she says then, you see now we have the High Priestess and the Moon, and the last slide now is I want to take us into overlays with these two, because one of the things that I feel this shows is we'll see these two slide together now, is that we'll start to see the psyche in its relationship to the membranes of archetype. So often we think that you can separate these things and just pull them apart. And I realized that part of my journey was that I felt like I had been given a ball of string, and mine was to pull out these different qualities. And that's why I start to see with the overlays the sense that all things are within all things. And that's why when we see the Moon and the High Priestess as one within the other, we're starting to understand what she's trying to teach us. You are a living, vital organism. Blood, not thought, flows through you. Your thought is the very essence of creative ideation. You are a genius beyond your wildest imaginings. You are an art form of creation. And the story, she says, is that this is what we're going to finally come to understand, because when we become art forms of creation, we want to become worthy of this great gift of creation. And that's when we turn no longer as actors with our backs to one another, but we turn toward one another, and we begin to understand that the play's the thing, and that together we can create a living ensemble that raises the enthusiasm not for any one of us, but for all of us. Because truly, the knowledge of the deep feminine, of the High Priestess, and of the Moon is that you live and you mirror whatever you believe. So whatever you believe will become your truth. Therefore, in the depth of your yearning, plant into, not what you don't know, but plant into the depth of the possibility that you are this, that story. And that story will become your roots. And I use my story upstairs as a proof. I didn't intend to do that. That was a seed idea. It would be crazy to do that. But if that's wanting to get out of me, I can only imagine what's wanting to get out of all of us. And so what I'm feeling now is, let's say 3 cheers for being human. Let's tell a story we can live with. I want to take us out and to just bring this full circle in the gardens. Put your jackets on. We'll do a little calling of the ancestors just to say thank you very much, because as I know, what actually gets everyone going is a little gratitude. So I'm grateful you're here, and thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you. And one of the important things to remember about this moon and about the full moon is this sense of, and it's really on all of us now, it's saying, give back to me what you don't want. But don't do it with animus, just give it to the leaf in your breath, in a sense of, Even if, because a lot of times it's not, well, I'm going to write that. It's like, no, it's what the High Priestess is saying. You know how it feels. You know the feeling. It's not something you're thinking. It's something, so find, a bit like acting with sense memory, find how that feels, release it into the leaf, and really with this sense of giving it back. That's why when you're really anxious, hug a tree. They're not kidding. It's that energy is energy, and we have a lot of grounding possibilities that we don't take advantage of, and a lot of our surroundings are going, I'll take your energy. It doesn't read the same way as with you. You're worrying about getting to Santa Monica. I don't care, I'm a tree.